Welcome back to American Zarathustra. Today on Imperium Art, we're really excited to introduce you to an Dissident Right indie comics artist creator. His name is Dillird Q Thurman. Welcome to the show, Dillard. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. It's very exciting for me personally because I'm a comic book artist, and I don't think that we really have enough representation on the dissident right in general. So there, of course, are other comic strip artists, political artists, etc. So we can talk a little bit about that. I think it's an area that isn't really talked about enough, but yet at the same time, it's really, really common. We see, Stone Toss and Garrison's comics and all kinds of comics out there on our feeds, So it'll be really exciting to talk to you, though, because you have, I think, and I will say personally, I think you have a very high level of skill, and your work is very, very thoughtful. It has a really strong kind of cinematic quality. We're going to get into all that stuff. I just want to also welcome my co-host and good friend, Nullus. How are you today, Nullus?
I'm doing well, and I just wanted to welcome our guest and also welcome the audience to another fine episode of Imperium Art.
Indeed. We've been having some really good conversations on Twitter and stuff recently as well. So we're very, very grateful to anybody who engages us. You can come at us with challenges, with questions, comments. We are all about torturing the data and getting more co-authoring of the Imperium Art project together with the other artists and other voices in the dissident right. So everybody, really, it's all about us. And so please do respond to the videos, get online, get engaged with us. So as we get started here, the first part of the show, we normally like to get to know who we're talking to let the audience get to know you. So Dillard, if you could tell us a bit about yourself and your artwork.
Sure. Try to go through my blurb here. I go by the moniker Dillird Q Thurman. I'm a pro-white cartoonist, I describe myself as. When I first started making comics, I went by my real name, tried to go in, more normie circles before having my David Duke style awakening sometime in 2013 on up to 2016, when I sort of just joined the alt-right because it made the most sense. I guess I'll briefly summarize my ideological development. Okay. Ending in my arriving here in the dissident right / white consciousness movement / whatever you want to call it. I'm still okay with alt-right. I don't mind it. I guess it's like more of an optics thing, but I don't see why we should be defined by what they call us.
Yeah.
I guess I've always been a sort of truth seeker. As soon as I reached my 20s, probably mostly because of my father's obsession with the Book of Revelations. This is also where I became obsessed with the notion of the apocalypse. I was brought up as a Baptist Christian. I became disillusioned with the religion, started off on my own. This mostly pressure from the burgeoning atheist movement at the time. Defaulted to liberalism, then fell into a string of subcultures, starting with sort of Zen Buddhism of the Alan Watts studies counterculture.
I've been there. Yeah.
Yep. I referred to Alan Watts as my church. I still like Buddhism and I still like Zen, and I'll even go back and listen to Alan Watts from time to time.
Wow.
But from there, I moved into the drug culture. I thought psychedelics was it. For some reason.
It's got all the answers.
Yeah, all you got to do is take this plant.
Yeah,
right?
it's press a button and everything's okay.
Yeah. The evolution of psychotomimetics, psychosis-inducing, to entheogens, creating God within, and then onto psychedelics, and then I don't know where they. Oh no, I guess they are in entheogens now. I don't know. They keep rebranding, but So I got into transhumanism sort of with Terrence McKenna, and I was a big fan of Robert Anton Wilson, all of whom I recognize now as part of the same cultural milieu. Yeah. Then I fell into fascination with the occult and secret societies, then on to aliens, and then I discovered Ayn Rand, and I read everything by Ayn Rand pretty much, and became a libertarian.
Oh, we lost your audio there, buddy. Could you speak a little louder?
Okay, where did I leave
Oh,
off
just
there?
about and Ayn Rand.
Okay, yeah, I became so yeah. That in 2015, I discovered Ayn Rand, and I listened to personalities like Stefan Molyneux and Christopher Cantwell.
Sure, sure.
I was up there in Massachusetts, so I was contemplating going up to the Free State Project up there, thinking that was sort of going to be my Shangri-La or whatever, Shangri-La
Shangri-La.
Mecca type. So and then from there the libertarian to alt-right pipeline, and I found myself here, dissident right winger. I was kind of entrenched at the time before 2016 in a folk punk scene, which was a ostensibly a grassroots music scene that pretty much espoused all aspects of neoliberalism. And I would argue with these people that would come over. I lived with some people that had a band, and they would have they would have shows, and then the traveling bands would spend the night, and I would spend all night like arguing with them until they just gave up. The Trayvon Martin thing happened. I became a race realist. I did stand-up comedy for a little bit in a very shit-lib town. Complete with rainbows, sidewalks, and BLM flags hung at the town hall. It's a very liberal. It's also a 5-college area up there in Massachusetts. Not to
that says it all.
Well, I wouldn't be doxing myself because I don't live there now, but
yeah, that says it all though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I consider myself libertarian. I espoused the philosophy of liberty, and I thought the non-aggression principle and everything was it. That was the holy grail of political discourse and solving all problems.
Where are you now politically on the spectrum?
Oh, I consider myself alt-right. I'm a pro-white, white advocate, identitarian, whatever name, I guess at this point you want to label it. I'm half Italian, half German, and 100% fascist. So
awesome, very good, very good. Your time has come. So that you've had an amazing, very colorful journey, and I would say that a lot of people have come through some of those paths to where we are now. It's quite fascinating. I think on another time I would love to talk to you more about Buddhism, since I studied it for 25 years, lived in Asia, and have a great deal to discuss. That's one of those off the radar, off the reservation kind of topics for the dissident right. But anyway, that and maybe another time. So what about your work though? Now, I want to say first off, as a comic book artist I happen to be lucky enough to study under a comic book professional who's a legend he worked in Marvel and DC for 30 years or more. And I trained a lot of techniques. Not only, it's just one of the hardest forms of art to do. You have to be able to draw anatomy, environments, gadgets, vehicles, architecture, expression, choreography, and then you have to consider lighting. It's the most demanding kind of art that you can think of, and I'm really kind of bitter. I have a bit of an axe to grind about how people are very biased against comics. Like if you ask someone, hey, have you seen the new Scorsese film? And they said, oh no, I don't watch movies. You'd be like, what the hell's wrong with you? Well, have you checked out the new indie comics? Well, no, I don't read comics. That's stupid. That's just stupid, So people need to wake up and get off their butts and go to the bookstore or the library, check out the graphic novel section. It's an incredible, incredible world, extremely rich. Now, having set the stage here, giving people some background, please tell us more about you and your art, your influences, etc.
Yeah, well, in a lot of sort of my influences you can find at the library. They happen to be like, the top names in indie comics or graphic novels. I guess they sort of forged the way. There's, of course, Art Crumb. What's his name?
Yeah.
There's Crumb.
We just call him Crumb.
Yep.
Who are your specific heroes and people that you modeled your style after?
Well, I was going to be a comic artist up until 22 when I discovered Daniel
Klaus.
he has a book called Like a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron, which kind of just all the way through it feels it's like you're reading an indie movie, like you say later on in.
Was there a movie made off of one of his Art School Confidential or something?
Yep, there's Art School Confidential and Ghost World.
Ghost World,
sort of
right. So these are two
one.
movies made off of his graphic novels. So go on.
Yeah. Yeah, so Daniel Klaus, Jim Woodring, Charles Burns, and Chris Ware, and pretty much in that order. They're the '90s. The '90s indie artists.
Yes.
So I mean, yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to jump in. If anyone is like visually literate in that style, and you see Dillard Q Thurman's website, which I'm going to link below, etc., you'll see, wow, it's beautifully, how do I say, translated over. You can see these influences very clearly. There are certain visual devices in the inking style. It's kind of difficult to describe. It's simply you just have to click the links below and go read his comics. So I hats off to you. I'm impressed with how you were able to show your love of their style and kind of reincorporate their techniques. It's quite well done.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, I've pretty much learned from them. So that's, kind of just I guess incorporating their style or conglomerating their style, but also just infusing my own style, or creating my own on top of that. Just being influenced by them, is kind of what I guess I'm going for as far as aesthetics, because they really, I mean, Daniel Klaus has kind of a 50s kind of aesthetic.
Yeah.
As far as harken back to the comics of that time.
Yes.
And then Charles Burns has this amazing pop art style. And then Chris Ware just has such an efficiency of telling a story with very limited anything. And he uses, almost just very simple shapes to describe it. And then you get Jim Woodring, who probably has become my favorite just because his art doesn't, you can almost read anything out of it, kind of thing.
Just for the audience, I will include links to those artists below as well, so that you can become literate in this indie comics, essentially. Now, something I wanted to comment about in your comics, your stories, it's very interesting because we have Clown World as a meme within the Dissident Right, and it's kind of like a coping mechanism for the disgusting insanity that's going on, and how it just continues to get worse and worse. And it's a sort of a very appropriate meme. So you've made a kind of a world out of that in your story. And as I look at it, I recently saw the second movie of It, Stephen King's It, that evil clown in it, and but there's aspects of your work that kind of remind me of like Mandy, and there's just this dark, surreal nature to it, and the pacing, and it's funny because it's comics, but yet the topics, the themes, and the storytelling, even the style that you have, it's extremely cinematic, and I'm just encouraging people to go check it out. It's quite good. It would translate to film really well, is what I'm saying.
That's what I think. Yeah, that's what I'm mostly trying to achieve is, and that's how I kind of see the medium too, as far as storytelling. It's just it's just a delivery of a story. Sequential art generally, I guess. A lot of people, since I think probably Daniel Klaus doing Ghost World, a lot of comics, they then made a lot of comics. I think even like Snowpiercer and stuff was originally a comic. There's a lot of movies that were originally a comic. It's pretty much, it's pretty much a script, waiting to be made into a movie kind of.
For sure. And this is something that people should know, is that for the comic book artist, getting a movie deal is the end of the rainbow. This San Diego Comic-Con every year has Hollywood producers going down there looking for popular properties to buy, and then and hopefully a year later that becomes a movie. So it's quite something. There's people would be surprised if they
The comic industry and
it's all connected now. So how can comics play a role in politics and culture, specifically in our world?
well, I guess what I would say is that I think that too many people are plugged into the hyper reality and are too overstimulated by media as it is. I tried to read Marshall McLuhan back in the day because I thought that he was saying something important because I've heard his name everywhere. So I read his book and really I think it's a kind of a lot of incoherent nonsense when he says like the medium is the message or something like that. But he talks about his sort of McLuhan paradigm of hot versus cold media. And so whenever there's a large amount of collaboration on the part of the reader or viewer of the work to sort of infuse his own imagination into the work to like either conjure up the pictures and everything like with a novel or something, that's a cold medium. And then like movies or TV shows that just pours into your eyeballs and your ears, and that's what's considered a hot medium as far as McLuhan is concerned. So I think that part of unplugging from the hyper reality or the matrix or whatever you want to call it, and kind of developing your own self, getting away from sort of the dopamine rush or addiction of instant gratification that like video games brings. That getting reading a book kind of trains your mind to be more involved in your own life instead of just using various mediums to escape into.
You're not passive. You're active in acquiring the art and the knowledge, and then your brain is processing it together with the images.
Yes, exactly. And
so that's kind of like a neurological look at the art of sequential art. By the way, the academic term for comics is sequential art. So if you want to impress people at parties,
if you want to be a nerd about it.
Yeah, you want to say sequential art. Wow, what's that? That guy's smart. But anyway, so that's fascinating in that sense. But I guess I'm kind of trying to bridge our art form, comics, sequential art, into politics and culture. I think everybody can fairly agree that let's say the Garrison comics that are out there, or Stone Toss, etc. They're just a really fast way to make a really powerful point. And it seems like the more simple the art is, the quicker people consume that knowledge. That I guess that works in terms of helping to educate, or it could be a form of propaganda. But how about actually reading a comic book or reading a web comic like yours? How does your work fit into our political scene is essentially the question.
Well, I'd like to sort of I satirize or parody or counter the degenerate art coming out of like Hollywood, and also be a part of the alt-right milieu. So to sort of create narratives, from that perspective, and my own experience is, I think, just achieving that, I guess, countering that kind of what's coming out from the mainstream and everything. And a lot of people spend more time with narratives delivered to them through the TV or Netflix and stuff. So and I think the best way politically for anybody to do and spiritually is to just not consume corporate art.
Yeah, Netflix, Hulu, whatever, all that garbage. Yeah, I'm hearing you loud and clear. That's a powerful point. So another thing that Nullus and I are very much interested in is kind of stealing the mediums or taking back the mediums of art I'll give you a quick example. He rewrote the lyrics to Bob Dylan's The Times They Are A-Changin', and I'm going to put it to music. I rewrote John Lennon's Imagine and put it to music as what I call reimagine. And the themes are obviously remoralizing our people. And so in a sense, I feel like you're kind of taking the reins with indie comics. You've grabbed that medium and you're making it ours. And
Yeah.
I think that's
I think you may have cut out there.
Oh, I know it's recording on my end, but all I'm saying is that you're taking the indie comics medium and making it ours, which is awesome.
Yeah. Well, I like I think that I like parody songs. Or I was just listening to the Mamas and the Pepes.
I was just going to recommend them.
Yeah. And you guys mentioned the White Hot Takes, I believe, and like Sven over at TRS and stuff, and the alt-right has does parody songs very well, yeah. And but Sven, and I've seen you did a video of one of your written songs too, or original songs, and Sven I know is he makes original songs, and I have my own comics. Like I wrote Clowns of the Apocalypse way before I was totally involved or had any sort of mature political stance. It was just I just knew something was wrong, and then I just wrote Clowns of the Apocalypse because it seemed as though everybody around me was mentally ill, and I wanted him to kind of, this is the first comic. I have like a prologue, but I have like I have a lot more in the works, or it's going to be a serial. Like that's what I'd like to develop, that it would come out like every 2 months or so. Awesome. Ideally, that would be great. But so it is a original narrative. Not to say that parodies don't have, aren't useful in propagandizing and stuff too, because I mean, parodies, they're immediately recognizable, and I think with like with my art, it's almost it's immediately interpreted, or it's immediately recognizable. People like the art style because people like Daniel Klaus. I get a lot of as soon as I got back on Twitter, I got Antifas or whomever filling out my form on my website, and they would reference Daniel Klaus and how like I'm a poor man's Daniel Klaus or something like that. So people recognize the art form.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I just meant to say that indie comics is extremely well known, I guess, among the hippies and the far left. And, in the 1960s, that's really when it came up. Robert Crumb, that whole scene, et cetera, et cetera. Who's the guy that did American Splendor? His name is slipping my mind right now. There's a movie.
Yeah, it was drawn by Robert Crumb, and I forget his name too.
American Splendor. Well, anyway, people can look it up. But, it's... that's my point, is that you're taking the medium or the genre back, or rather, not, I shouldn't say back, but you're taking it away and you're making it ours. And so I appreciate that a lot. So I wanted to know if you could give us an in-depth description of your stories and your characters, so that we can kind of get into that world. So like if, I was on White Art Collective Cinema Nazis with Jeff Winston and Lord Wolfshield, and we talked about a Spider-Man movie, an animated movie. So we got in-depth into the personalities and the characters, etc. Help our audience to understand your characters and what's going on in your stories.
Well, it's a story about a bunch of evil clowns, I guess, that live in the woods.
Do they work in the government? Never mind.
And they... well, I think the intent of the comic is for the reader to kind of have that question in their head throughout the whole thing, and if they knew who I am, then to sort of suss out how this comic is racist, anti-Semitic, sexist, or transphobic, or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's kind of I kind of like the intend the mystique of the comic from that in that sense. So people will go into it from either perspective, thinking, so who are the clowns? And I've gotten that question, of course, because I mean, it's just like zombie movies. You want to know who the zombies are intended to
Symbolize. Yeah.
represent. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's sort of the mystery
Okay.
of the whole thing. But I love sort of noir or film noir.
Yeah.
I love like mysteries and surrealist narratives, like David Lynch and stuff. And
There you go. That definitely has a Lynchian quality to your work for sure.
yeah, it's just like a relatable protagonist goes into this alien world and interacts with the environment, and almost choreographed situations occur almost by an intent from like an omniscient director, just to fuck with them or something.
Yeah.
And and then drop clues. Every once in a while he'll pick up a clue, like there's going to be like a seam in the production.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that kind of aspect, because I think that they're the word is a prestidigitation. I remember that word from Freeman Fly would say that word in
What's the
relation.
word again? What's the word?
Prestidigitation.
I have no idea what that means.
It's just everything is pre-planned in anticipation to the viewer's reaction.
Oh, okay, right.
Culture, even like down to like the Super Bowl halftime show or something. They plan it, and then like, or I guess like a counter, like COINTELPRO or like controlled opposition or whatever. It's just like, okay, this is going to happen, and that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So we're going to anticipate, this group of people going this way. Like, it's very
I
kind of a conspiratorial view of the world, and I
Yeah,
think that's sort of necessary. I think a lot of people are having a developing conspiratorial worldview.
Yeah, I think since the pandemic, more people have had time and a reason to go find out what the hell's going on. And
Yeah.
I think the first step towards that, you do kind of fall into, I don't want to call it conspiracy theory, because that's really a dialectic that's used to divert people from the truth. And so, how can I put it? I explain it like what's happening is a giant puzzle, and people are just looking at one and two pieces at a time, and they don't see how they connect, and so they say, "Oh, it's a conspiracy theory." But if they need to get a bird's eye view, and essentially, I would say the Dissident Right has that. That's kind of one of the great things about it. But anyway, to get back to your work, though, that like postmodern paranoia, that eerie something's not right, and I feel kind of a little sick to my stomach in a good way, for your art in a cinematic way. The tension's there; it's palpable, and it's impressive that you can get that across in a comic book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think just to go back to what you said about people coming to the alt-right, I think of the alt-right as sort of a reverse mystery school in a sense, where the cultural narrative is so heavy-handed.
Yeah.
Like I remember being a libertarian and people calling me a Nazi and a fascist, and I hated both those things. Like I would talk about like, no, I'm the opposite of that, right? I'm a libertarian. I'm a classical liberal. I'm what you propose or pose yourself to be, but not really authentically you are. So I think that a lot of people disparately just on their own are going into and actually looking into these things, and that's how you become alt-right. So you start with sort of the shot, or you start with the end of the mystery.
Yeah.
And then you kind of put the pieces together, and you put together a sort of worldview that by the reason and evidence you can arrive at the conclusions of of everything.
Can you give us any spoilers or anything about the plot that people should tune in and follow you and look forward to?
I think the last one, I wanted to compile this one and make a 40-page, a 60-page, because I have two. I had to split an issue that I was intending to make a 60-page into two issues. So this is the first of those two. This is like the sort of superhero phase where our hero is naively running in, balls out into the clowns and thinking that he's going to deal all this damage, not knowing what to expect really, and how.
I do that every day. What are you talking about? So is there a nemesis? Is there some kind of story twist? Is there, what do we have to look forward to?
Well, I wanted to get it out before the elections because I have a clown at the end of episode 2 that is that's relevant, I guess.
His name wouldn't happen to be Biden, would it?
It's a top elite or a reference to.
Okay. We haven't heard anything from Nullus yet. Let's give him a chance. I've just been, grinding through this because I'm so excited to talk about comics with you. Nullus, what's your take on all this?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for all this information, and I'm just sitting back learning and digesting all this stuff about comic book art. And again, I'm very naive to all the details behind the scenes. Although the aspect of storytelling is familiar with me to a degree, I would say that I like to write movie scripts as a hobby. So there is a certain kind of a convergence in terms of how to tell the story in a way, because a script writer will write very visually, although not as a comic book artist. What I'm very fascinated by is what you mentioned by when you were going through your journey of discovery, where there was a point that you felt that something was wrong, but you couldn't identify what that was at that particular time. And I think that this is an important point that we all need to be aware of when we're speaking to a broader audience, that there are a lot of people out there who might instinctively feel that something is off, that the people around them are insane, as you mentioned before, that the world that we're living in is some kind of a weird simulation of what it should be, or some bizarre different dimension, or something happened. I think that what's that theory with the Bearstone Bears, or what is that? The Bernstein Bears, or whatever. Yeah.
The Mandela effect.
Yeah, the Mandela effect. Yeah. Yep. And so people have all these different bizarre theories, and so people, because why? And if we even go into this whole issue of quote unquote conspiracy theories, to me, that's all a rationalization to try to explain what's going on around them. So for us, as artists and as people within our sphere, our goal has to be to provide that contextualization, I think. And I think that maybe I can ask you the question. So when I'm looking at a comic that you or Donald are phenomenal, by the way, about, I mean, again, my best attempt is a stick figure. So I'm just telling you. So for me, it's fascinating to understand the mechanics behind it, the influences behind it, because most of the people that you mentioned, for example, I've never heard of. I've maybe a few, obviously, Lynch and what have you, but in terms of the comic book art aspect of it, I'm very unfamiliar with that. And maybe just a quick question, and hopefully it's not going to be a naive question, but and this might relate to some questions people in the audience might have, is what is the difference, and this could be addressed to both you and Donald, what is the difference between a caricature, an editorial comic, and then a comic that both you write, with the whole storyboard and everything? So where and how does that place, like, what's the difference in terms of its positioning and importance?
I would say a caricature is just an exaggeration of a person, a recognizable person, and just an exaggeration of to lampoon their features. And then I guess an editorial comic would be saying something in like a sequence of panels, or maybe a one panel. I'm not sure. I guess Donald can take that one. But what I do is a sequential narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, or I mean, in a comic strip would be a gag strip. So you
Right.
like set it up just like a conventional joke, and then arrive at the punchline at the end.
Okay. And
So
again, I'm just trying to understand these different, like Stone Toss in this sense would be more of an editorial comic,
I would say a comic strip only because there's more than
right?
one panel, whereas an editorial tends to be one panel with there's some image
Okay.
on there and
Yep.
somebody's talking and there might be some signs or something. You know,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
that's,
Like
you
a
know,
Ben Garrison pointing to
Ben Garrison, yeah, perfect
to
example. The
labels and stuff.
caricature, I'm sorry to cut you off. The caricature actually has a wonderful history, like the New Yorker, for example. There's a lot of great political and entertainer caricatures, etc. I worked as a caricature artist for many years. I still do caricature commissions. I sold a Friedrich Nietzsche caricature to Richard Spencer a little while ago, something, something. So it is fun in that it kind of takes a well-known figure or I could draw a caricature of you if you want, but it I guess it plays with them. It has fun with them in some sense, and it turns them almost into an icon. So there's a lot of different caricatures slash cartoonist styles. And if you're, say, a great caricature artist who works for the New Yorker or something of that nature, then or let's say, what do you call it?
Mad Magazine.
Mad Magazine is massive for that. Rolling Stone.
Yep.
I actually know Philip Burke. He is the caricature artist that every single Rolling Stone magazine, when you open it up on the interior, there's a caricature painting. They're gorgeous paintings. It's got a fantastic style. I really should link that below as well. And there's just something about it. It's hard to describe, but it's kind of fun, but also kind of wonky. And a lot of times, the artist might add a little something symbolic in there to make a jab at somebody or make a comment, a statement. But comic books or slash sequential art, this is sort of more the zone we're in, whereas, editorials and comic strips, they have their own zone. I don't know what to call it, like kind of where you would see them in a magazine or newspaper. Comic books, you're going to see more in comic book shops, libraries, and bookstores. More or less in graphic novel form in the bookstores.
Yep. Compiled.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say rarely do they serialize the. I know Chris Ware's Jimmy Corrigan, the smartest man in the world, or the smartest kid in the world, was serialized, so he would come out with like a strip at a time. But for the most part, it's they're released in comic books. So yeah, a lot of like Daniel Klaus or Charles Burns, he had Black Hole, and that would come out in issues, and then at the end, that's pretty much the conventional way to put out a graphic novel. It's just a compilation of the whole work, and then you put a title on it.
So Nullus's question leads beautifully into my next question, which is what should people know about sequential art and indie comics to help them appreciate them more? I think it would be fantastic if this episode could get more people on the Dissident Right to pick up a graphic novel, to pick up some indie comics, to just explore that medium and then see that, as I put it, comics are really just movies on paper.
Yep.
That's
I would say the
essentially.
same. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's somewhere between novels and movies per se. I always think of it as movies on paper. But what could you say to the Dissident Right to make them go to a bookstore or a library and pick one up?
Well, I would say I guess all my perspective on art generally, I guess, is that all good art is right-wing art, because if you're pointing towards a truth or trying to grasp at a truth or just objectively portraying your experience in the world, I think of Charles Burns and Black Hole. Like he has all these metaphors for growing up, or like someone lying, like a mouth will develop on her mouth while they go camping, and like all like things that she'd been saying to him would come out, like, this couple or whatever. So it'd be like this, like, sort of horror. There's this horror aspect to it, but he's speaking in all these metaphors about, like, just real life, like, situations or whatever. But if you want to kind of move back and get like a bird's eye view of it, you see like these teenagers, these nihilistic teenagers, in this sort of like horror world where all these like mutations are happening and stuff. There's one in particular that I thought I'd mention is this teenager on his bed in a messy room, beer cans on the floor. His bedside is that book, the Kool-Aid, the acid Kool-Aid. What is it? The Kool-Aid acid test by Tom Wolfe.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think just by Charles Burns probably didn't have any ideological intentions by making, his comics and stuff. But I think just by creating his art and having that need to express himself in that way, and just objectively show, what he is thinking, like, in his like in his imagination, that has meaning to him, then it's going to have meaning to other people, and they're going to relate to it. I think just by doing that is contributing to a sort of a healthy art movement that like gives that gives a perspective on the world and stuff. And like I said, I think even like David Lynch, I've heard a lot of unconscious media or cinema about episodes about David Lynch, and they can't really avoid the fact that, especially with this film, I'm gonna forget the name of it, but it's about that guy riding a lawnmower on the highway. But at the heart of it is really it's a traditional story, and it's like a lamentation about a family like getting broken apart and moving away from each other and stuff, and not relying on each other, and like falling into like mental illness and stuff because of that. So I think that any real, art, any good art is going to point in the direction of, what we've lost as a culture, or just like, the degradation of a people without traditional values, and, resuming traditional values and actually like looking at them and seeing their sort of utility.
Mm-hmm. So that actually kind of answers obliquely my next question, which is, what are your perspectives on postmodern art or contemporary art? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's an appeal to nihilism. It's a stripping of any sort of divine aspect of humanity on purpose. It's degenerate.
Yeah.
I don't have really anything nice.
Yeah, we've covered this a lot as well. So it's interesting how you talk about the spiritual in art. You just mentioned that a second ago. So then, in that case, what would your sort of religious or spiritual views be, and how do they play a role in your art? Do you see my point?
Yes. So I do come out of like the Buddhism and stuff. I'd actually like to answer this with this anecdote about being on Instagram with that cartoonist Jim Bob. I don't think we've mentioned him yet, but he's been sort of part of the Groyper movement, and he's been like practicing debates and stuff. So he was talking about morality, and basically he was having his argument is that he was just using it as like morality as a shorthand for approving God, or morality. Right. Therefore God, like if without God there is no morality. And so I sort of jumped in there, and I already have like an opinion about the Groypers and the PSYOP. I essentially think that it's been co-opted and stuff, really? To point the focus away from Jews, and then even to be an apologist for people like Harvey Weinstein and stuff, the like Me Too movement and stuff. So I asked him, I told him that my argument I presented to him was just basically that morality is a evolutionary survival strategy, and that whatever ensures existence is good and perpetuates the species, and that which threatens existence is bad. And then I also provided Stefan Molyneux's universally preferable behavior. So he replied back. His reply was, so if invading, killing, and looting your neighbor ensures existence, if we were to rely on reason to arrive at morality, then wouldn't that be moral? And so I would say no. I said, maintaining healthy relationships with your neighbors is more conducive. So then he fired back, what if you wiped them out, Old Testament style, and like there's nobody there? So like, how is that wrong? Like, how is that not permissible without a God? So I asked him, what is God?
Mm.
And he didn't have an answer for it. And basically the conclusion that I've arrived at, being on sort of the alt-right or whatever, the pro-white movement, is that I think God is the collective soul or the superego of the race, and that morality is a sort of codified evolution. And I've arrived at these sort of conclusions through like conspiracy and religious studies, I guess.
Could
But
you
that's
repeat what? I'm sorry. Could you repeat what you said about morality? You kind of cut off for a second there. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Morality is sort of a codified evolutionary strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that would be my opinion, and I guess the fulcrum, or what like really the linchpin as far as morality, because you can go at it from different angles. I think that really what we should define as morality is protection of children, and I think that and tradition goes towards this, and
Well, you're cutting off a little bit there. It's kind of
sorry.
jammed. That's okay. No, it's a technological issue. So how do you channel these ideas into your art?
Well, I guess the spiritual aspect of art, or like the transcendental idea of art, of becoming spiritual and living mythically, or
Mm-hmm.
I think have these two things in mind, to know who your people are,
Mm.
and to know what the purpose of your life, or the ultimate like purpose of your life should be, or what makes something right and what makes something wrong. The
Mm.
preservation of your people, I think, that goes towards protecting children. So if you don't even have a civilization that protects children, then there are no heroes of tomorrow to do the same thing.
Mm.
So I think that ensuring a sort of spiritual development of the child, or protecting the child to the point where they can take up their own spiritual development when they come of age, and that has to do with self-actualization, and developing your life purpose as far as giving back, and in doing your part of ensuring sort of the
So that's what you do as an artist. You create content, media, culture that both is living mythically and is contributing to the world, even though, in a sense, yours is more of like a warning. It's sort of a critique of the dark world and the dark times we live in. Would you say that's fair enough?
Well, I think that the culture as of now, the degenerate culture, and all like the philosophies, that one is inculcated by the culture, is one that entrenches someone that in the ego. And so I don't think that you can have a spiritual path without your imagination, without developing an imagination, an imaginative sort of narrative of your own life, which is to say, live mythically. So I think that, like Bugmen, for example, they don't have this. They've sort of killed off this aspect of themselves where they have an internal dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
or think of themselves in a narrative structure.
Mm-hmm.
They've pretty much outsourced that to like say like
Disney.
like superhero movies and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I think we've made Nullus wait long enough. I would love to hear what he has to say on this topic. He's very thoughtful on the subject matter of spirituality, religion, and art. Nullus, would you like to chime in and share any thoughts?
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit here to
Yeah,
unpack.
indeed.
So maybe I don't even know where to start. I'm trying to reorganize my thoughts here.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the absolute morality of how we define it. I think that I personally am taking a Catholic position as where how I see the role of the absolute of morality of God. With that said, my goal within Imperium Art is also to try to find points of convergence where all of us of different, let's say, philosophical or religious mindsets can meet and find those common threads. So I don't want to engage into the deep debate between whether or not where morality comes from, and but I will say that what's very interesting is that the point, I think, of the absolute is more, at least for us in many ways, is more about understanding that there are purposes that are above us, that are more than us as individuals. And I think that's a good point of departure when we're talking about religion and art, morality and art, so that we understand that we're more than the individual ego that controls our lives on a daily basis, or defines our lives on a daily basis. But with that said, we also have to understand that we are looking at the world through the lens of our ego. So we have to also balance this out and understand that we are who we are. We are looking at the world from our own eyes, and we're trying to balance this view with what we believe is a morality that stands above us. Now, how we define this morality, whether it's through the Catholic God, the Christian God, the pagan God, whether it's through a collective identity, is for each person to define for themselves, at least for how I see it, and in terms of the artist. What I think is really interesting is how you talked about the focus on the children. And I think that would be a very interesting point to make. And I think that ties into how our goal has to be in our creation, and what we do is not just for ourselves, but for future generations, for those who aren't even around yet. So we don't know yet what we're doing in many ways. We're just creating. We're trying to understand the world we live in. We're trying to create context in this mad world that we're in right now. And so the reason we're doing this, it could be, there's multiple motivations as to why we're doing it. But if you really want to break it down to its core element, it's to provide context for the future. It's to provide context for those generations that can look back and say, you see, there were people who stood up, there were people who said something. Not everybody conformed to this insanity. And it gives them strength, inspiration, and motivation to move forward. I think that's an important message that I think that we need to hammer down with everyone, regardless, again, of where we're taking our spiritual position. Now, what I was very interested in your work, and I'm going to look again at your what you wrote. You talk about the transcendental art, which speaks to the soul and it communicates directly to the spirit. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
I think that I think it's just what I said as far as like reconceptualizing God and like these two key factors of knowing who your people are sort of foundational to an identity, and developing a life purpose to like be that mythical hero to ensure protection of the community or of the people or whatever, and to perpetuate traditions and your people into the future. I think that this is how we transcend, sort of. I conceptualize religion almost psychologically, kind of from a psychological standpoint. So for someone to like to spiritually transcend the ego, or to transcend materialism or something like that, you necessarily have to have in place these foundational key factors of knowing who your people are, who you're protecting, what your what your energy is to go towards protecting and preserving, and who you're fighting for, I guess, and where is the line of as far as morality and everything, like where do you you can't really have a purpose in life and achieve all these things for your people, because I'm kind of reconceptualizing all these things in relation to a survival strategy for whites, in relation to a certain group of people who have an entire structure and religious milieu or codes and ethics that essentially see us and all goyim as natural resources to be exploited,
Right.
and to so I think that I think a religion necessarily needs to consider this and to counteract it. So I think that I think that this is the role of the hero, and like the mythical ideal of the hero, I would say, is this sort of this mythical character that we all attain to kind of exemplify.
So that ties right back into your comics, and you've got a hero character. So it's all one big loop in a sense. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that your your race and your people are your piece. That's the where you find your purpose. That's where you find your context. And then morality kind of springs forth out of that in some sense, be it through one religion or one spirituality or something, but you have a purpose. You're not just an individual floating in space, kind of like what the left does. The left just teaches you to go from one pleasure to the next, and that you should laugh at tradition and all that, we're one race, the human race, all that baloney. So it's a very deep topic, and we could go on and on. I would like to kind of continue forward with the show and talk a little bit, get a bit focused back on your work. So your work reads like a good indie film. You're framing a shot in such a small space. Your use of light, shadow, it's exemplary. It's really good stuff for that style, for that medium. So what is the thought process that you have while you're composing your pages?
I really, I just have the story in mind. I come up with the story first. I sort of, I conceive of the story, and then through my I infer sort of, I guess, through my influences and stuff, to arrive at the shots or at the style and stuff, or how this story is going to unfold. Like I said, like the film noir, or like a stranger in an alien world kind of thing. That's very appealing to me, and that's kind of the use of shadows, I guess, is just to create the mystery and air of to dramatize it.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't really know.
Well, there's a sort of like your satire is mixed with something dark and surreal. It's like a kind of sadness of modernity, So I think it's just a beautiful aesthetic. For someone like myself who is literate on indie comics, I can see, your stylistic influences show through. So you just, you really reached a kind of a mature state in this medium. So I think this is just a wonderful thing. It's a great thing to introduce you to the White Art Collective, to the Dissident Right, to people who enjoy Imperium Art. So let's change direction a bit here and start to get your thoughts on, and kind of like refocus it on Imperium Art. And, what can you bring to the conversation? What is Imperium Art about to you? You've read Nullus's essay, checked out some of the videos. In general, what are your thoughts on Imperium Art? And I'll just let you start off with that.
Well, what I gather from the essay is to say I guess what I struggle with is succinctly in referencing, European writers and stuff, and I think that he brings a lot of that in context of the tradition of art, and I'm pretty much influenced by pop, I guess, of the last 30 years or something like. So I don't really have too many references, so I appreciated that. And but as far as that, I don't know, except for what I have. What I bring to Imperium Art is just alternative stories and stories in a medium that are just alternative narratives, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So in the dissident right arts, there's you've got generally like this archaeofuturism, you have traditionalism, we kind of reference ancient European art, and you've got the fast wave
Oh, I
style.
lost you.
Oh, can you hear? Well,
Yep.
I'm just basically saying that how do I say this? We have the aesthetics of synthwave, fast wave, and archaeofuturism, and just traditional art. So I think you're bringing something quite unique to the table, and that's again another reason why I wanted to have you on the show and introduce other people to your work. I don't think maybe someone like. Maybe Handsome Horse or John from Lilo and John would be interested in your work because it's fresh, it's different. That's of course I'm not saying I don't like fast wave aesthetic and all that the stuff that's the current style of Imperium Art or Dissident Right art, but it's just nice to see somebody bringing something new to the table there. I guess. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess what I gather is it's a kind of support network for pro-way artists that can count themselves amongst each other, creating art and a variety of art. So I think just as many people who are pro-white creating art is a good thing. It's going to create an alternative.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying then is Imperium Art is also then it's not just the art itself, it's the network of artists. Is that what you're saying?
I guess what I think is most important is the message, and these like the key factor is just saying something that is pro-white in your art, or just being. I think there's value also in just being an artist that is pro-white, because a lot of like people at like comic conventions and stuff will police or will gauge you for where you stand politically and everything, and then proceed to kick you out of the convention or whatever it may be.
I suffered that kind of situation in my local city. I was doxxed by the guy that doxxed me is I shouldn't say doxxed. He basically threatened the guy who runs the Comic-Con because you're supporting you're giving a platform to a Nazi. Turns around a year later, he's putting out literally his Antifa comics. I mean, the guy he did a story on a Santa Claus, surprise Santa Claus, and Santa Claus turns out to be Karl Marx, and he's just a shit. He's just a turd, and it's. Those are the evil bullies of the scene. So this is kind of an interesting segue into Comicsgate. Do you have any thoughts on Comicsgate? Anything you want to share?
Well, I did go to some indie conventions in Massachusetts. There's a big one, and I wasn't fully developed as far as politically or creating things that had an explicit. I don't even think Clowns isn't really that explicit, except for at the end of my first comic. I say that I'm alt-right, and that's when I kind of decided it. Yeah. But I don't really say anything explicit. I did have a Pepe meme. I had John Carter Pepe versus the Feels. What are they? The green guys. Farkas.
Oh, it's sort of like I think I know the ones you're talking about. They're like the fatter frogs. Are those the ones?
Well, they're the green aliens, and they have like the double torso from John Carter,
Oh, I
Uh,
know the one. Yeah, I
yeah.
apologize. I don't know what they're called, but I should because I read those comics growing up. But I know the ones you're talking about with the
Oh yeah,
four.
those comics. The comics are great, but I've read all those books, and they're really I love Edgar Rice Burroughs. Um, but I guess I had a postcard with that image on it, and some people freaked out. And right across from me actually was a representative of the guy, and I'm gonna forget his name now, that actually originated the Pepe in
Is
his
that
own
right?
comic.
No kidding. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
and what I would say is people would be like, "Do you know what this means?" And I'd be like, "He's just a funny internet frog, as far as I am concerned." So
uh-huh.
I would just skirt around it because I didn't know how to deal.
Yeah.
And I guess there really is no way to deal with hall monitors, really, except for just to avoid them completely.
The cultural hall monitors.
Yeah.
I would have to say, I think this is a good time to make a statement to the dissident right that the comics culture world is one of the worst places for artists of our ilk.
Yeah.
If I were to do what I do, if I take, say, my American Zarathustra webcomic to any Comic Con in America, I would be physically assaulted and blah blah blah. There would just be hell to pay. There, I don't know if it's because of the kind of the geeky, nerdy, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of, I don't want to paint comic book fans as being like immature or childish or something, but there's a lot of them mixed in there. There's of course a lot of
Yeah.
cool people too. There's lots and lots of cool people. So, and I've only ever had fantastic times at Comic Cons, but unfortunately, you've got a lot of those pink-haired soy boy feminist types, yada yada, and
Yeah.
I find even like people of color at Comic Cons are more chill than those wackos. So I don't know. It's
It's
tough.
a conquered space.
Yeah,
It's a conquered cultural space, and they have a hegemony. The SJWs are
big
back.
time.
That's what I called them
Oh yeah.
back then.
The,
I guess
yeah.
they still are.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's. I mean, yeah, they just dictate the sort of ideological industry standards at this
Indeed, indeed.
point.
So, in a sense, that's one battleground that perhaps we could take back, or at least try to have create our own battle or our own land, so to speak. So, I think that's what Comicsgate was supposed to be about, was to try to create alternative comics. On my Facebook page, I've been showing a lot of live streaming of me drawing Dynamite Thor images
Oh, yeah.
for the Kickstarter that we completed. And yeah, there's a lot of people out there that can't stand the global homo agenda in Disney-owned Marvel comics, et cetera, et cetera. So we're the only ones out there providing alternatives, and we're kind of a small camp, I guess, but I think we're doing important work.
Well, if not alternative, then something there's definitely a market for anything that's neutral, that
At
doesn't
least.
weigh in on either side.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's like John Delarose says, he's the author of Dynamite Thor that I worked with, make comics great again, or make comics fun, I'm sorry. And yeah, it's for real. People, they're tired of it. I mean, it's just same thing as like movies and even TV commercials. My God, everything has got an agenda to shove down your throat. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I think, yeah, go
Donald,
ahead,
if I
no.
could interject, yeah, I
Sure,
just wanted to circle back to the Imperium Art point, because I think that's an important aspect that we should talk about very quickly,
sure.
and I think that the way we have to, and we're trying to understand what Imperium Art is as we're doing these conversations, and as we're sharing our thoughts with everyone and getting input from everyone. Excuse me. So what I'm trying to figure out is the different roles of Imperium Art, if you will. The one role I see as this convergence of people of different backgrounds, people of different cultures, people of different faiths within our collective biospirit, within our collective spheres, that come together and can share experiences with each other, teach each other, and also help each other grow creatively as artists, and also as individuals. So I think that Imperium Art could play a role in that we provide that existential community, so to speak. And that would be expressed through organizations like the White Art Collective, for example, which I think is doing phenomenal work in that regard. Mm-hmm. So I think that when we're talking about the role of Imperium Art as a meeting place, then the White Art Collective would be that embodiment of Imperium Art, so to speak. Then, and when we're talking about Imperium Art as an art form, and then you have many different aspects to look at. You have, in the music, in the songs that are written, what is Imperium Art, what isn't Imperium Art. That was an interesting, fascinating conversation we had with John from Lilu and John, mm-hmm. where he doesn't believe that everything that he's writing is a part of Imperium Art. And yet what everything he is writing is dissident art in his view. And I think that that's a valid point, so that an artist can essentially create work that is outside of Imperium Art and both inside Imperium Art. I think that we also have to make a distinction between in our conversation, for example, with Handsome Horse on avoiding LARPing and trying to create something that's not there. So we really are looking at this hopefully as organically and as down to earth in a down to earth manner as possible, so that we understand that there are, at least in my view, there is a continuity, a tradition that reaches as far back as antiquity, and that all of this is a part of our collective cultural consciousness, our cultural awareness, and whether it's implicit or explicit, it is a part of Imperium Art in the sense that we draw upon this to create something new. So I think that that's something that a lot of art that I believe might not necessarily be Imperium Art would belong to Imperium Art, but more of an organic, or let's just call it a divine side of Imperium Art, where you can take the religious aspect, the mythological aspect of it. And again, I'm just trying to say this just to recapture and bring back how this ties into the art that you're doing. And comic book art in general, right? Because I think that there's this misconception that comic book art is not high art, and I believe that that's an incorrect assumption. Now, does that mean that all comic books are high art? No, not at all. Does that mean that all comic books that are written, for example, or Dissident Right comics are all a part of Imperium Art? Also, not necessarily the case. So in your view, how would you define, so with all that said, how would you define your art, your comics within the concept of Imperium Art as far as we are trying to define it so far?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of indie art, or a lot of indie comics gets the reputation of lowbrow. And then most of the comic book industry is a sort of is mythological in the sense that all these superheroes are, representative of known mythological characters. As maybe I don't understand the entire concept of Imperium Art, because as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I could gather, it's the Imperium is a grouping of sort of like an art vanguard or of sorts, or like the tip of the spear as far as arts on the right, and then a network of artists. So what falls into the Imperium and what falls outside, I guess I'm of the opinion that if you are a pro-white artist, that your creations will be included in sort of the umbrella term of Imperium Art. But I guess what you're saying is that to be considered Imperium Art needs to be part of a art tradition, or a tradition of the Western civilization or the culture up to this point. Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily. I'm trying to define this, to be honest with you. I personally think that this is the most difficult part of Imperium Art for us to define, which is what is for example, if you take let's say, pro-white, dissident right, a work of art, whether that's a song, a comic, or a poem, or a story, what have you, and how do we define this within the confines of Imperium Art? Now, Donald and I have initially said exactly what you're saying, that we believe that any of these would comfortably fit within Imperium Art. Mm-hmm. Then, as we go over these conversations that we've had, and what is this? I think, Donald, this is the 12th conversation, right? So,
correct.
So now we're also being confronted by questions from various different points of view that suggest that Imperium Art should be discriminating, in meaning that it should emphasize a certain kind of excellence. Now, I don't know if this is the case. I'm not trying to force that issue, but I do find that that's an important part of the conversation, is whether or not Imperium Art is distinct from dissident right art, for example, or whether it's inclusive of dissident right art. And so this is where it becomes very interesting, because when you make it distinctive, I think it's not a bad thing to make it distinctive. But if you do make it distinctive, then you have to create certain conditions for that distinction. And so then the question is, what are those distinctions? And what is it that makes your work Imperium Art, for example, and someone else's work more dissident right art, but not Imperium Art? And this is really, I think, the core of the question. And it's a very difficult one.
Does it more conform to an aesthetic, or fall within a tradition from the past that is to be continued, or to be revived in different reinvented or something with elements from the past?
May I jump in and comment? This is complicated stuff. For starters, I wanted to say that I believe your take is correct in terms of if it's pro-white art, it's Imperium Art. And then that's the simple cornerstone of it all. Now, spanning out from there, it gets more complex. I believe that the whole purpose of this show is for artists in the dissident right to come to the table and discuss these things, and we collectively define it. Like I've always said, it's not the Don show, it's not the Nullus show. We're documenting the arts of our movement, and so, but we're doing it with an eye on the future, which you talked about, protecting children, connected to the past. You get the idea. It's all part of saving the white race, really. So these questions of distinguishing between high art, low art, concept, aesthetics. What your work proves is that you can do, I do not think indie comics are lowbrow, but I understand the cultural definition of it as lowbrow. Again, I don't think of it that way, but it demonstrates that you can do any kind of art form as long as the message, theme, intent, and some aspects of it are connected to Western aesthetics and tradition, then it is Imperium Art. So granted, the drawing style, the aesthetics of indie comics is very specific. It's very specific. It came out of the, sort of 1960s hippie drug culture, that whole thing, Grateful Dead, LSD, the whole anti-establishment culture of its time, which was really wide open, all kinds of new things. There was a certain roughness and raw quality to it, a sort of a caricature of reality that sometimes is very sexual and very dirty and ugly. Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco, all this various aspects of the life of these kind of hippie wanderers. But yet that is part of American history. So, you're just taking that and turning it into our art and our history and our culture. Go ahead, Nullus.
Yes, that's exactly. So I don't misunderstand me. I didn't want to put you on the spot with this question or this point. That wasn't
a brilliant question. It's very.
But it's an important point, and the reason is that I believe, at least, and this is again more of a superficial comment at the moment, but I believe that that there's an important aspect here that we're working on as well, which we haven't really addressed much yet, which is deconstructing the deconstructionists.
Mm.
And taking and reappropriating things that belong to us.
Well done.
So I think that we have to take that into context as a part of the Imperium Art project overall.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when we're looking at it, if we're looking at things from a pure aesthetic point of view, then the Imperium Art sounds a bit snobbish. It sounds like we're talking about, great cathedrals and then huge murals and symphonic orchestras and all that stuff. And that's not really what we're talking about here when we're talking about Imperium Art. We're not we emulate those sources and we consider that a part of our tradition. And we use that to contextualize us going forward. But I think that we live also in a different world today. We live in a digital world. We live in a postmodern world or a modernist world. Some would argue that we're still in the modernist world. Suffice it to say, we also live in a world where a lot of our traditions have been appropriated. A lot of our institutions have been taken over by subversive elements. A lot of our words and terminology, our art, our expressions, our symbolism has been taken away, deconstructed, twisted, and used against us. Yeah. And I think that a part of our goal within the Imperium Art project has to be to take all of this back, to say, no, we don't accept that. We're going to take what you took from us. We're going to twist it back to where it belongs, and we're going to shove it up your. Excuse my French,
yeah,
but
beep.
Beep. So what I mean by that is that we have a lot of and it's a huge project, and it's a lot of responsibility. So I think what you're doing with your comics, what you're doing with understanding the contextualization of what you're trying to produce is extremely important, and it's an integral part of Imperium Art. So that's really what I wanted to get at the end of the day. And I didn't want you to feel that I'm trying to say the opposite. So that's what I wanted to get at, just to give a little bit more better explanation.
Go ahead, Dillard.
Yeah, well, it seems like you're saying it's almost like you're saying you want something that's timeless, art that stands the test of time, and of like a high quality, not just like snarky jokes or something that's kind of flippant or just a very short term sort of thing. So like anything that I think that is high quality and that really the kind of that punctures the mainstream or gets out there, that I think appeals to just anyone with like the sensibility of or an eye for good art. I think maybe I don't know, maybe that is kind of what you're getting at as far as just lasting evergreen art that appeals to potentially more people outside of our very cliquish sort of milieu that gets inside jokes and stuff like that, even though that is what keeps a subculture moving. And indie art or indie comics did come out of this sort of grungy, disgusting sort of rebellious kind of nature and cultural happenings, but art itself and indie art itself is just it's a medium and a market at the end of the day. Like indie, just anything falls under indie that is not described by the mainstream. So I would say even if it's not a superhero comic today, then it's indie comic. So there really isn't a market. So I mean, even like if you were, there are indie comics and graphic novels or whatever that have forged the way, and then that kind of stopped in the 90s. I don't see anything of quality coming out now. And to go back to sort of the comic gate or even the gamer gate kind of stuff, it's kind of an enforcement of mediocrity, because whenever they see something of quality that has a contradicting narrative to the ideology or whatever, they try to shut down immediately and call it fascist, and they yell all the buzzwords and get the guy kicked out and stuff. And anybody that is creating quality that is established, they've got to signal their conformity to the ideology in order to continue to operate.
Exactly.
and then from that point on, they'll even retroactively go back and talk about how problematic their prior works are and stuff like that. So they've got to apologize, and if they survive the apologizing,
yeah, good luck.
Then they have to, they've got to bend the knee, so to speak.
The left
forward.
cannibalizes itself, so that's
Yeah.
a tricky thing.
So I think the left is defined by corporate art. Like they don't have anything, grassroots. Even like the very skilled professional artists on the left, they don't write their own stuff. That's what I like about like auteurs and sort of real artists. As far as what I call real artists who kind of conceive the entire vision themselves, from start to finish. And even like the cartoonist I'll do everything. My favorite cartoonists, they have the vision themselves, and they from nuts to bolts create the entire work themselves. So it's a finished like vision that was hatched inside their head, and they don't even know necessarily if it will be accepted or be interpretable by other people. So I think that. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was done pretty much.
No, I think you made an excellent point about the mediocrity, and I think that what we see today is culture of the lowest common denominator, as opposed to striving toward perfection. And that doesn't necessarily mean that what you're creating is perfect, but your goal is to strive toward perfection and quality.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important distinction to make. And I think that Imperium Art, and I'm sorry, just to finish that thought, and I think that Imperium Art, one of the core elements of Imperium Art is to strive toward perfection in your goals. I mean, again, I couldn't say my poetry, for example. I have no clue whether or not my poetry has any kind of what the quality level of it is or what have you. I don't think of it in those terms. But what I do say is that I try to, every time I write something, every time I'm creating something, I try to do it one better every day. And I try to learn from my mistakes, and I try to express myself a little bit differently. So I think that striving towards perfection, trying to work toward a quality work is a core element of Imperium Art that we need to emphasize.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Beautiful.
If I can just.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to. Sorry about that. I was just going to say that I think part of quality and being an artist is knowing when you have something, and knowing what to put down and sort of produce. Like if it's worthy of actually manifesting. So I think that's a big part of being an artist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have to consider the time and effort that it takes. People don't have any idea how much we struggle to produce what we do in the visual arts. I'm sure, of course, music has its, struggles too, etc. But time, materials, effort. I mean, even just the time and effort to learn the skills to do what we do. Comics production work is hard work. It's very time consuming. Anyway, yeah. Once you've got something worthy of your art, and that really is significant, that people hear it and that it enriches their life in some way, it's great work. It's important work, and I really honestly wish artists got more credit and more money. That'd be great. So we'll have to get to like a Imperium Art, the business discussion one of these days, and talk about publishing, galleries, et cetera, et cetera. But it has been a real joy to have you on the show, Dillard. And where can people find you? What's your website address?
I am on, well, you can find me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram a lot more than anywhere else, but my website is refractorindustries.com, REFRACTORINDUSTR. You can spell industries.
Yeah,
I wanted to hyphen.
I'll put a link below.
Okay, yeah, because it's a big.
And how about on Instagram? Would you know the address or?
Just search Dillird Q Thurman, and you'll find me.
By the way, Dillard is Dillird, not
correct.
A. So wonderful. And there were a lot of really rich takeaways today. We haven't really come across this discussion before in all our shows. So, it's quite a valuable show, a very important element. And, also, actually, I really want to thank Nullus, because he's the one that kind of spotted it and was able to kind of weave a thread out of that topic about, what clarifying Imperium Art as relates to comics, aesthetics, ideas, all these things. So the focus is getting stronger and tighter. And again, I just want to thank you so much for coming out today and doing the show with us.
Thank you.
All right, guys, have a good night. Thanks to the audience.